Hey everybody, this is Colin G. Murphy and welcome to Colin Podcasting About Real Estate, show 33. My guest today is a young man called Lane Kawaoka, and Lane currently owns 4,200 units across 12 states, and he's done that using the power of networking and syndications. He lives in Hawaii and he uses his skills as an engineer to what he calls reverse engineer the wealth building strategies used by the world's most successful investors. It's fascinating guy, and we had a great conversation about why Lane considers himself to be a first generation wealthy American, how he got himself out of the corporate treadmill through real estate investing, the transition from buying a handful of single family homes, turnkey single family homes, to massive apartment investing in really a few short years, the different mindsets and tax strategies used by the wealthy, including bonus depreciation and infinite banking, which was really, really fascinating, regardless of where you are in the wealth building cycle. There's some great insights there. We talk about how he outsources most of the work involved in buying 1,000 plus units a year, which is an incredible number to think about, and his views on the opportunities in 2021 and beyond. He's quite bullish on the views for continued success in real estate investing, and I would share that. I think 2021 is going to be a great year for real estate investing, but we shall see, right? We will proceed with caution as always, but with courage. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. And like I always say, bear in mind I have a website. I'm constantly tweaking it and trying to add new content. It's colininvestments.com, COLIN investments.com. You'll also find me on all the usual social media under either Colin Investment or Colin G. Murphy. I always appreciate people following me there. And check it out, and let's head on over to Lane and see what he has to say. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Lane Kawaoka, how are you doing, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Colin. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So tell us a bit about yourself, Lane. Where did you grow up? Was your family entrepreneurial?
Yeah, so I'm out here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I grew up here. We were not entrepreneur. I remember I asked my mom if we should rent out our home to make money. Probably
Mm-hmm.
showed like I was kind of entrepreneur back in the day, but I know my parents said like, no, you don't wanna rent out your house because it's people screw it up, right? So yeah, nobody in my family owned rental
Yeah.
real estate. It was and I call myself first generation wealth, right? My parents went to college, they were highly educated, and that's what they taught me to do, to go to school, study hard, get a professional job and work at said job for 40, 50 years. So that was the path that I kind of originally set off
Yeah.
on.
So what did your parents do? Were they, doctors, engineers? What kind
They
of?
both had masters and one had a doctorate, but they just pushed a bunch of paper. My mom's a teacher, so
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, high performance of society, right? But they still work till everybody else did. Whenever you're supposed to retire, 60 or
Yeah.
62.
And so you obviously you were wired a little differently. Why do you think that was? Was it because you were reading other ways of doing things, or you're hanging around other types of people? Why do you think you were so different?
I mean, I've heard of this book, Gretchen Rubin's Four Tendencies. She has kind of four main archetypes: the rebel, the questioner, the upholder, and I forgot what the last one is. But I'm the questioner, right?
Okay.
Why do you have to work at a job for 30, 40 years?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that you only can get 8 to 10% in the retirement account? Why do you invest in retirement? Why do you buy your own house to live in? A lot of these things don't make any sense to me, or you have to
Mm-hmm.
think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people just take the dogma and they take the pill and that's how they live life, right? But if you ever stop to think about a lot of these financial dogma out there, you would discover that yeah, it's engineered system to keep us all working.
Mm-hmm. True.
If
Yeah,
you
it is.
bought a rental and then you bought another rental a few years later, you'd be done.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. But it sounds like you didn't kind of jump into full-time real estate from an early age and start flipping houses. You kind of did go down the corporate route, right? You did kind of get the degree and get the busy professional job. And so how did that work out, and where did real estate come into it?
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely walked that linear path that I think a lot of investors go down the professional, became a professional engineer, worked at that job for a couple years, and programmed by this language code to go buy a house to live in, and that's what I did. But
Hmm.
because I was traveling all the time, construction sites, I was a construction supervisor, so I'd go out in the field, 100% travel. I was never home, so I realized that, hey, why don't I just rent this thing out? I'm never home anyway. And that was where
Sure.
I got the bug. The rents were $2,200 a month, and
Hmm.
the mortgage was 1,600. So for a young 20-something-year-old kid, almost over 10 years ago, that was a lot of beer money. And
Yes.
then I started to think about it, and I was like, wait a minute. It didn't take me too long to save up for this for this house. If I just did this again and again and again, I don't know how many times, 5, 6 times, I'd be able to quit my day job and fire my
Hmm.
boss. And
Hmm.
that was where I got really serious about this stuff, started to develop podcasts, etc., and learned about rental value ratios. Bought my first few rentals in Seattle. Realized that wasn't a good idea,
Wow, that's expensive,
and
man. Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of where the thing started. Buying for cash flow.
So you started in Seattle buying houses, a $2,200 house for rent. I mean, that's on the one hand, you kind of think, well, if I did buy 5 or 6 houses in Seattle 10 years ago, you'd be doing pretty well with the crazy appreciation. But on the other hand, you can kind of pivot to where cash flow is much better. Is that what you ended up doing after that first house? Did you start buying slightly cheaper ones that are easier to save up for?
Yeah, I mean, 2012, I had a few units, and if people don't remember, 2012 is when things kind of started to uptick in the market, and I was like trying to buy stuff, and I realized like you shouldn't buy luxury type of properties. Like that first property I bought was more of a A property,
Mhm.
and I realized for sophisticated investors investing for cash flow, you don't really want to do that. You want to go to the B side.
Mhm.
And I also realized that, yeah, you don't want to buy properties in primary markets such as California, Seattle, um, New
Sure.
York, Boston, Hawaii. So I started to, and then at the time the prices were going up, and I was like looking to buy stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. I was a little spoiled where everything kind of worked in cash flow. And I started to look out of state. I bought a property in Birmingham from a turnkey company.
Okay.
It worked. I got proof of concept. So I sold the rentals in Seattle. And a few years later, 2015, I had 11 of these single family home turnkey rentals.
And this is
Five
all
in,
kind of on the side while you're still working the engineering job.
yeah, yeah, all on the side. But during this time, I
Nice.
mean, very quickly in, I became a kind of a really bad employee because I realized, like, why would I want to work 50% harder for 10% more pay where I could just go buy a rental property every other
Yeah.
year?
If you put that 50% time into rentals instead, it'd give you a much better personal return, right?
Right, right. And I also got a little ticked off. I didn't work at a very good company. They paid me well,
Hmm.
and they're very conservative management style, which I learned a lot from back then for in terms of project management and
Hmm.
finances. But I was not happy. I was very unhappy actually. I had a very
Okay.
distaste for corporate America. I
Hmm.
eventually went and worked more public sector jobs, and I kind of enjoyed working with the people a little bit. But yeah,
Hmm.
work's work, right? When you get a taste of cash flow and you see what the other side's like, there's no going back.
I do, and you're like having 11 rentals is also work, but it's a different kind of work. You actually get a kick out of it and a buzz out of it, and you enjoy it, and you enjoy, I guess, talking to people about that side of your life much more than you would want to talk to people about whatever projects you're managing for a big
Mhm.
corporation.
Yeah,
So is that where you found like 11 is pretty busy? That's kind of getting to the stage where you kind of decide, well, this is taking up a lot of time. Do I want to keep working 9 to 5, or do I want to just dedicate myself and see how far I can take this real estate thing?
yeah, it's a good sample size. I mean, I had professional property management to do all my pain in the
Okay.
butt work for
Well,
sure.
that makes it easier then, yeah.
Yeah, but you definitely get a good like indication of your time demands and how these things flow. You don't always make money on these things.
No, you don't.
One
That's
of
for
the
sure.
biggest epiphanies was, with 11 rentals, I had one or two evictions a year, a few big issues that came up every quarter
Mm-hmm.
on, and which was no problem. I mean, the property manager took care of it, but for 11 rentals, I had maybe $3,000 of passive income a year, which,
Right.
ain't bad. I mean, definitely what 20 something, 25, 29-year-old kid didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
But to be, I don't know who in this world can be financially free on $3,000 a month. You need three or four times that. So you need the three or four times those issues. So now you're talking about an eviction every other month and some kind of big catastrophe that happens every few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I realized this wasn't the most sustainable passive thing. And
Yeah.
that was where I started to search for, bigger, more scalable investments such as private placements and syndications.
So how did you talk us through that? And I completely agree with you, by the way, that having yeah, if you do go from 11 rentals to 33, you will have three times all the bad stuff as well. And it's the word passive tends to get less and less meaningful when the property managers are constantly telling you about evictions and appliance replacements and AC replacements and whatever else, and you're still involved in a lot of those big decisions, even if the manager's dealing with the day-to-day tenant interaction and minor repairs. It starts to get you start to get pulled in different directions. I agree. So you decided to go multifamily. It sounds like apartments. So how did talk us through your thought process there and how you got that started? Because that requires a whole other level of capital.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of to your point there too, the other reason was I think a lot of sophisticated investors need to look at their return on equity. A lot of newbie investors that have been doing this a long time, they say, "Well, I'm cash flowing." I'm like, well, that's only part of it, right? Yeah, it's great that you're cash flowing. You're probably better than most, but if you've been doing everything you should have be doing, and you're paying down your property, your tenants paying down your property, you have built a lot of equity built up, and maybe your property depreciate. So your return on equity went down. It's not as high as it was in the beginning when you owned the asset, up front. So sophisticated investors kind of are mindful of this return on equity, and maybe it goes from 30% down to 10, 15, 10%.
Hmm.
At that point, you need to sell or refinance or 1031 into the next asset to keep that leverage high. With 11, 20, 30 units, that is impractical. That's a lender's dream, right? Because that's loan origination fees till the cows come home for them, and that's easy milk money for them. But for passive investor, it becomes impossible to effectively leverage your portfolio. So yeah, on to multifamily, more scalable assets. I mean, multifamily was just it's just a logical step, right? I mean, most of us have lived in apartments, or at least I have,
Sure. Yeah, me too.
and we own rental properties, which is, apartments is just that's what they call it, multi-housing, multi-family. It's the same thing like single family in a way, for the
Hmm.
most part. So I went out and I kind of got educated. This is the first time I pulled out my wallet for mentorship and education,
Hmm.
paid 30 grand. I don't know if it was quite worth it, but it did get me in the circles with the right people. And that was all that made the difference. Single family home crowd is very different from most of the real estate crowd, right? Single family home buyer and home investors are maybe a small part of the wholesaler flipper mentality people out there.
Hmm.
um, Multifamily is a small speckle of even that, right? So most guys are doing multifamily. Well, you need to have money. Most
Yeah.
people, quite frankly, don't have any money. So you can't go to the local RIA, because that's just a bunch of house flippers or guys trying to get rich because they're broke.
Hmm.
You also can't go on like the internet stuff, because like, I mean, that's what I call the cafe route, the cheap A, easy free, right? Those
Okay.
people typically don't have any money.
Hmm.
So at this point, I realized I had to pull up my money and to get into the right rooms with the right people. Because another thing I realized with these multifamily apartments, is you need to qualify for the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac debt. And unless you have somebody on your partnership team, you cannot
With
qualify for
experience.
that.
Is that what you had to
Yeah.
do? You had to partner up with a more experienced apartment owner to get your foot through the door to get your name on the first couple of loans?
Right. Because I mean, if not, you can't. It's plain as day. It doesn't matter if you have the experience. You just need
Mm-hmm.
this sort of like invisible Fannie Mae Freddie Mac card that you've done one of these things before, whether you have the experience or not. It's a very unfair game, but this is the game. And once you have it, you're glad that the way is the way it is.
Because
That's
you're
hard
an
to get
insider
in.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that work? Can you talk us through the numbers briefly and what your sponsor brought to the table other than his name?
So I went in and someone did me a favor. And this is where relationships are key. And
Mm-hmm.
at least this is my way into it. I someone just did me a solid and brought me in. Plain as that.
As in they just they became a what did they do exactly? I mean, they apart
So
from introduce you
someone
to the
had a
lender.
yeah, someone had a deal and they
Mm-hmm.
brought me in as a
Gotcha.
co-sponsor. My net worth was not over $1 million at that point. So really I look back on it and there's like no reason why I was should have been involved. But no, I've tried to kind of I think maybe they saw something in me where I was going to give back. And I think I have tried to reciprocate as much as possible as I've kind
Mm-hmm.
of grown as an investor and operator these days. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's like a chicken and the egg thing, right? You need the
Yes.
experience to get started. But if nobody's going to bring you in, or especially if nobody likes you, you're not
Yeah,
going to be brought in. It's the good
it
old
is.
boys club.
It is the relationships. I agree with you, and those guys hang out in a lot of masterminds, which aren't, which you need, which aren't, cheap to get into. They're
Yeah.
they're good value, and they often have a very good return on investment. Like you said, you said $30,000, which is a lot of money, but it got you started with multifamily investing, buying
Yeah.
thousands of units, right? So somebody brought you in and did you a solid, kind of added your name to a deal, which then enabled you to do another deal more on your own bat. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, that's how it initially worked out. I realized later I didn't really need to have that Fannie Mae Freddie Mac experience because yeah, once you grow your network, there's enough people with that card. It doesn't to me it doesn't really matter. What I
Hmm.
realized, it was more finding the deal and then finding the investors is the hardest thing, right? When you're
So
getting
how does
started.
it typically work if you have an apartment community that's maybe $5 million? I mean, what percentage of that is a Fannie Mae loan? What percentage is investor syndicated money?
Yeah, so $5 million property, you're going to need the key principles of net worth greater than or equal to the loan. So let's just say you were 3 million bucks and I was $2 million net worth. You and I could go and co-sponsor that loan. Or if you were $5 million net worth and above, heck, you don't even need me, right?
Right.
So that's what you need. But you also so that qualifies for the debt, right? That allows
Hmm.
us to go and sponsor that loan to get it from the bank. But then we also need to bring up the capital, as you're saying, right? So usually like 20-25% is a good kind of first high level, right? Different markets, they can give you higher loan to value leverage,
Gotcha.
like more tier one markets like California or New York.
Hmm.
Granted, I don't know why anybody would want to buy there. I mean, it cool. You know what? Like if that's your game plan, that you're appreciation guy and you're okay not getting cash flow in the hold, that's cool, right? I mean, it's all about increasing the net operating income, increasing the
Hmm.
budget. My strategy personally is I want to be cash flowing all the way, just in case something happens, right? That's been the philosophy since the turnkey rental buying days, and that's what I keep hold to now. I don't want to be like another one of these stories, like how you hear, like I had everything and I lost it. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
I
there's
just
nothing
heard
worse than
it too
having a ton of
much.
assets, but you need to put your own hand in your own pocket for $50,000 of repairs that your cash flow didn't cover or that you didn't set aside reserves for that. So I mean, yeah, Totally
Well, I mean, the
agree
biggest
with
thing
you.
is like if the market dips, right? Like if we have another pandemic or who knows what's going to happen yet, right? Like you
Hmm.
can at least hold on to the asset. Cash flow to me is synonymous with oxygen. You
Okay.
need oxygen to breathe. Yeah, you got to be doing a bunch of stuff, right? But you need oxygen to do that stuff. And to me, it's like if the economy drops or something happens in the world, another war, I think that's
Yep.
why everybody was bibber babbling about the pandemic or this or election because there was no war. It was a pretty good time in the history. Right?
Absolutely.
Um, but that's beside the point. I
So,
kind
so
of
what?
got off
So cash
topic.
flow is key for you. I mean, what boxes does a deal need to check before you put your own, money on it, or before you get other investors to go in a deal? What is your criteria? What numbers are you offering those investors? What's their exit strategy
Yeah,
after?
so it's got a cash flow, right? So just in case, I don't want to say recession proof, but in a way it is, right?
Hmm.
It can cash flow allows you to drop your rents, to stabilize occupancy, to keep the oxygen flowing so you can live to fight another day, even in bad times. So that's
Yep.
criteria one. So
Hmm.
what does that mean? Well, we're investing mostly in cash flow type of markets. So, and then number two, you don't buy a deal unless you have undervalued rents and value add opportunity. So you're able to fix it up, put a little sweat equity into it, force appreciate it, and bump those rents up. But it needs to have. I mean, you can do this in California. A lot of people do this,
Sure.
but they just don't have the cash flow in the interim. Now there's ways to mitigate that, like they just raise extra capital to keep it on the side as oxygen tanks in the corner. How much
Yep.
oxygen tanks you need, maybe 6 months worth. I don't know. That's their strategy. But every strategy works when it works, right? And I think that might be a little bit too I don't like that strategy for me personally. And like another thing is I only want to buy stabilized assets in the beginning, so 90% occupied or more to
Okay,
create
that's fine.
that
Hmm.
cash flow initially.
Okay, so what return are your kind of passive investors typically getting? And I guess it differs whether you're buying C minus or B plus and so on. But what are they typically getting a moderate return for 4 or 5 years, and then a higher return in year six if you're refinancing it? How do you structure them?
Yeah, I mean, usually you're trying to underwrite the deal so investors are getting anywhere from 80 to 120% return in 5 years or so. Right?
Hmm.
I mean, especially when we're staying in this narrow band of light value add to medium value add, and you're rehabbing units naturally as tenants turn over.
Hmm.
So that means you're going to get through with most of the units in the first 5 years, and then, or first, most of the units in the first 2 years. Add another
Sure.
couple years on for flood for slush, and then add another year just to stabilize the P&Ls, and that's how you get 5 years. So yes, it is possible to refinance in year 2 or 3,
Hmm.
but I think it's just more prudent to underwrite for 5 year sell.
Okay. So what year did you buy your first apartment community? When was that?
I think that was like 2017.
Okay, so you still haven't. So really 2017 you bought your first one, and so how many units was that first one?
I think it was 140.
All right, and so
Yeah.
how many deals have you done since 2017? What are you up to now?
30 deals, 4,200 units. I've gone full cycle on a
Wow.
handful of them. But mostly the Class C stuff. I mean, if there's people want to hear any lessons learned, I tend to get away from Class C stuff these days. Not that they did bad in the pandemic. I mean, the collection, the occupancy stayed over 90% for sure. But
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I'd rather just work with tenants who at least have $500 in the savings account.
Yeah,
And collections is just harder. They're kind of like a bunch of kids. They don't pay their rent.
a lot of
Um,
work.
yeah, it's just a lot of work. I mean, in the beginning, that was all we had access to was those C class properties that you could buy for 30 grand a unit.
Hmm.
But there's a reason why most people don't touch them who've been around for a little bit.
So the people that have been around for a little bit, they're buying what B quality stuff, B minus quality stuff.
Yeah, B to B plus, maybe A minus, I think. But like I think investors need to distinguish between a more of a middle market operator, like I think how we are, as opposed to more of an institution. Institution has higher fees, they have a lot of staff,
Hmm.
worse LP split structure, and a lot of times the minimums are 100 to $250,000. Right? They don't work with $1 to $4 million Joe Schmoes a lot of
Yeah.
times.
What's the minimum investment to participate in your syndications?
Usually we try and keep it under. Once an investment goes over 100 investors, it kind of gets a little crazy. So, you
Sure.
backwards engineer that. Most times we're around a 200, 300 unit apartment. So,
Hmm.
maybe about like $50 to $60,000 minimums. Definitely staying away from the $30,000 minimums and below, for
Okay. I
sure.
mean,
It's just not worth it at that point, because then
I
then you start to pick up these like kind of annoying investors that are kind of like always trying to get in for the least, but ask times as many questions as your hundred
yes.
thousand dollar investor.
Yes. Yes, especially if it's their first rodeo. So like 30 deals in 3 years, that's a lot of work. I mean, this isn't buying a house. You're buying communities here, and like pretty much almost one a month. I mean, where did you get the resources to do the due diligence on those and go through all the accounts and the balance sheets and the inspection reports? I mean, you personally can't underwrite like and obviously you're underwriting a lot of deals just to buy one. How many people have you got working with you to go through all that?
Yeah, I mean, so I usually do a deal maybe every quarter.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's a little more sporadic than that. Sometimes there's a dry spell, for sure. But a lot of the work is on the initial like stabilization period, right? So try and make it a point not to have multiple properties going through that stabilization period at any one time. And
Okay.
this is my general approach of dollar cost averaging, through this all. As long as the property cash flows, it's undervalued rents, it's forced appreciation potential,
Hmm.
um, I'm game, right? And so as far as team, I work with, a few different partnership groups. So, um, you know, I think, I'm definitely not on the broker side. I don't like interacting with brokers.
Okay.
And I'm also not on the initial grunt work of going through 1,000 deals to find one,
Hmm.
right? I'll look at the ones that come through, but I'm not wasting my personal time analyzing those
So
deals.
how
I've
do you
already
get to there? That sounds great, but how does that work? How do you position yourself so that you're only finding the
You
good deals
outsource
that
it. I mean, I think everybody needs to go through the process of analyzing two or 300 deals. I mean, that took me
yeah.
from 2015 to 2017 and analyzed 200 deals. Most of them are just garbage because when you're starting out, you don't get access to any good deals.
Hmm.
You're just being thrown a bunch of junk.
Yep.
Um, but you need to like learn how to analyze deals. So you start to see like you start to build heuristics of you don't even need to open up the P&Ls. You already see the high level stuff and you already know that it's not going to pencil. Like if for example, the expense, if I look at the per unit per expenses per year and I see it's under like 3,500, I know this thing is totally BS already.
Hmm.
Going, I already know that the broker is hiding stuff and I don't even want to look further, really.
Right. Okay, so you
Um,
only look at the very professional presentations where they're disclosing all the relevant
yeah, that
information on
that
the.
was in the big. You develop this in the beginning, but then you
Hmm.
quit doing that stuff, right? Because there's no way I have the time, or why I should be using my time to do mundane 15 $20 an hour work,
Hmm.
right? A lot of these things can be like produced, or somebody you can train somebody to do this. Yeah, it takes a little bit of expertise and probably around, like I said, 100 to 200 hours to understand how to do it. But you
Hmm.
don't need to train them in a way to get to that level. You can bring it so they can kind of bring it to that threshold, so that maybe if there's 1,000 deals that comes through the inbox, they can filter it and say, "Hey, man, look at these 50." And then from those 50, I can look at like, oh, all right, maybe I should actually pull out the analyzer and run these 10. Remember that
Hmm.
thing I taught you? Run those 10 and get it back to me. so I don't waste my time, right?
So where do you find these people? Are these all? I mean, obviously it's not a virtual assistant. Everything's a little higher than that. Are
Well,
they?
you
But is
can,
it?
I mean, yeah, we've done that before. The virtual assistants can do that.
Mhm.
But this is where we've kind of, at that point, we started buying the deals and we start to build relationships with the brokers and just have the brokers do it.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, you seem to have done a good way of, because there is a certain amount of hours work involved in deciding what price to offer for a property. There's a lot
Right.
of work that goes
And
into that.
that's
So you seem
like,
to have outsourced a lot of that
there's a
hours
big
background work.
dissidence between when you're starting out and once you've broken through and you've bought a few properties. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're broken through, you and the broker have this rapport, and it's kind of like, dude, why are you sending me this stuff? You're just wasting my time. I'm gonna go to the other guy, or I'm gonna wait. I'm not even gonna look at your deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know they have a big fish on their side that's like proven and closes deal, and that's all a broker wants. They just want something reliable.
Yes.
They don't really need to sell it for the highest price. Often, we're not the highest price, but we're proven to close and we're easy to work with, and we don't do all this nonsense like retrading after the fact. We say what we're going to do, and we're honest people, good
Mm-hmm.
business guys. And the broker, it behooves them to put our offer first and to push on our behalf. But also, if they're the broker, what they're also doing is you're just throwing junk out to anybody else they haven't been proven, in a way
Mm-hmm.
of kind of repelling those people away. So and initially we had to fight through that.
I can imagine.
So
Yeah.
it's a
That. Yeah.
paradigm shift,
Yes.
It's like,
No, it sounds like you've been through it all and you're at the other side now, and it's a lot easier. And so, and that kind of brings me into this little pivot that I've read somewhere, that you're obviously an engineer by background, and you try and think of it as reverse engineering the strategies you've seen like extremely successful people use. I mean, it seems like you've gone through a couple of them there, that you're outsourcing a lot of the stuff that you don't need to personally be involved in. I mean, can you talk us through some of the other strategies extremely wealthy people use to accumulate income and wealth?
yeah, I mean, some of the big ones are, we don't use retirement accounts. Um, four big reasons why we don't use 401ks, retirement QRPs, all these things is, number one, I'd rather pay my taxes on the money today, because I'm in a lower tax bracket today. Now, most financial dogma will teach you that, yeah, when you retire, your tax bracket will go down because you don't have that big salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll
Sure.
shrivel up and die too, by the way. But I don't know about you, but I'm pretty optimistic about the world and myself. And I think I've planned things out where I'm like, yeah, in my future self,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be in a higher tax bracket because I'm be baller, right? I'm be making money. These investments be paying out for me. So therefore, I'm behind a higher tax bracket in the future. Therefore, my point number one, I want to pay my taxes today because my tax bracket is going to be lower. Point number two, taxes are going to be higher in the future because look where this country is going. How else are we going to pay for these trillions of dollars of stimulus,
Yep.
but to raise taxes and inflate the money supply, which is another topic. But I believe that there are higher taxes to be coming in the future.
Mhm.
Therefore, I want to pay my taxes now. Somebody said that when you're having your money in a retirement account, it's essentially like the government is having a lien on all your stuff until you take it out. My number three, I'm gonna retire a lot quicker than the age 62. So I want to use my money, play with my money before that. I don't want it locked up. And number four, which a lot of people don't realize, is when you invest in private placements and syndications that do cost segregation, you get this bonus depreciation. Many times, investor invests 100 grand based on the deal or how much leverage is being used. I've seen everyone from 40 grand to 100 grand come back in year one bonus depreciation. Those are called passive losses. And if you don't use them, they become suspended passive losses. But one of the tricks is becoming real estate professional status so you can use those passive losses to offset your ordinary active W-2 income potentially. Now there's a little bit of trick behind that, but I don't get those passive activity losses if I invest via retirement funds. Therefore, I would like to invest my cash to get those passive activity losses, because I run another high level mastermind for credit investors. And yeah, deal flow and finding deals, analyzing deals. I think that's what gets people in the door because I'm a syndicator and I know the stuff. I know all the little tricks and games. But what I have to often trick people is, hey man, those deals is only one third of the game, but they're the igniter for the rest of it. All these other high net worth strategies. Once you get the passive activity losses from deals, now you can use that to pay little to no taxes on the tax side. Once you pay little to no taxes, it's almost like turbocharging how much money you're able to save. And that's how you trigger other wealth strategies like infinite banking and other legacy creation. That's when you're moving. You think you're moving when you're making 14 to 15% IR on your investments. Well, you're turbocharging it once you're paying no taxes.
You were. That was a game changer for me when I got a high level CPA and I was earning a high income from flipping houses, but paying high taxes on it as well before I met people further ahead of me that had lots of rentals. And one of the main reasons they were buying and keeping a lot of their rentals wasn't just passive in-stream mascot. It was that accelerated bonus
Right.
depreciation that you can take on year one. And that reduced the tax burden and all that flipping income dramatically. And I was bowled over when I broke it down. I think the first time I did it properly was 2018 and then did it again last year. And you're talking about huge amounts of tax savings here that can give you that frees up cash to do other stuff with it. I mean, you mentioned one thing that piqued my curiosity that I don't know anything about it. You're kind of saying phase one is your 14% IRR, phase two is your bonus depreciation, so you have more money to invest. And then you mentioned infinite banking. What is that concept?
Yeah, so it's using whole life insurance. And when I say that term, you probably should have a knee reaction there. Because yeah, most times whole life insurance is when your sleazy friend from high school calls you up after 20 or 30 years and wants to have lunch, right? Yeah, we're using the same product, but it's configured in a very different way where you're maximizing the amount of liquidity. So you're putting the money in this life insurance thing and you're
Okay.
able to pull it back out via a loan. So you
Okay.
can go invest it, maybe in a syndication deal, maybe in a note, whatever you want, right? You have the liquidity to do that. But the whole reason why it's going into this policy is a few other side benefits. First of all, you're getting a nice little return, maybe 4 or 5%, but it's tax free because it's life insurance. And that's the little loophole that why you do it. And then also it's when it's life
Interesting.
insurance, it's off the table of litigators. So this is the way that this is where the term infinite comes around. And there's a lot of people that call this many different ways. It's
Hmm.
kind of been bastardized with different marketing terms, but it's always essentially the same thing. It's using whole life insurance, putting a bunch of money in, turning into cash value that's making a return tax free and off the table litigators, but pulling it right back out and investing it. And that's where you're creating this infinite loop, infinite cycle of banking on yourself.
Fascinating.
So I
Yeah.
think it's for if you're under $500,000 net worth. I got a lot of guys who kind of call me that are under $500,000 worth and get all excited about it. It's not for you guys. It's for the higher net worth guys. Once you're a little bit inefficient with your liquidity, if you're one of those guys who has 20, 50 grand lying around here or there in your checking account, this is the stuff for you because this helps optimize your liquidity, right?
Hmm.
I mean, being liquidity inefficient is kind of a good sign. Everybody kind of gets there, especially when your net worth goes over $1 million.
Hmm.
But this helps really streamline that and gets it working. So and you can create multiple of these policies. You can customize it. I mean, it takes a lot of my clients like a really really long time to kind of get the hang of this thing. It's kind of simple, but it's I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Yes, a little
Just
bit of action learning. You learn it by doing it, and after you've done it, it might seem straightforward, but just kind of reading about it, it might seem a little esoteric or something. But once you get stuck in there and actually do it and see the numbers in and out,
right. And I think
then you
what
realize,
I've noticed that helps is like learning with other people that have done it. Like, some
sure.
guy gets his policy and then, you talk to him, why'd you set up with that amount? Why did you do it that way? Why'd you go with that carrier? What writers did you get? And I think that that's why I'm big on like the mastermind and the peer group, right? Having being around pure passive investors, learning about this stuff, and because this stuff always changes, right? Like bonus
Yeah.
depreciation wasn't around prior Trump, and like then there'll always be another strategy. Like I'm kind of looking at solar power now, because I
Hmm.
know like conservation easements may be going away.
Yeah, that's again your mastermind. And obviously you need a top quality tax advisor, and there are top quality tax advisors that hang around masterminds. That's how I found my one, and but you need to get yourself to a certain level to go in there, and then they'll help you get to the next level
Mhm.
after that, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if you do get a top level tax advisor, I mean, you're the client. You're the one who needs to drive the ship.
Yeah,
I mean, I
you
was
can't
an
outsource it
employee
all. Yeah.
once.
Hmm.
When you're an employee, you just do the bare minimum, in my opinion, right? Unless the client is pushing you on a more cumbersome strategy that is potentially more audit risk. To me, you got to be silly to do it,
Yeah, you got to
right?
understand what you're doing. I mean, the successful people that are saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, they actually know the ins and outs. They can start reeling off all the numbers to you off the top of their own heads. It's not they haven't outsourced it to someone else to figure it out, because that's how you land yourself in hot water with the IRS. You need to be aware of what's happening with your name and your
Right.
money, right?
Right. I mean, you need to be empowered. Taxes are your number one expense in life. So you need to know what you're doing. If your net
Hmm.
worth is over $100 million, that's where you hire a family office consultant. But most of the people listening probably aren't net worth of $100 million. So y'all got to do it all partly by yourself, and
Yeah,
then have the
absolutely.
the professional, the CPA accountant. To me, in my opinion, their job is just to do the paperwork for you and sign the document. To me, I don't think that it's really their job to do the tax planning, because they don't know what deals they're going into. They don't know the risk reward profiles. They don't know the bonus depreciation coming back at you for those deals. I mean, I'm in 30 deals. You think my CPA knows what the heck they are? No, there's no way. There's no way they know what they are. Right. That's why I have to drive the ship and tell them what. But that's just a difference of opinion. That's kind of what I kind of teach.
Yeah. So what do you see in the future for you, Lane? What's happening in 2021 and beyond? What are your plans?
Just keep buying cash flowing properties in good areas that have value added appreciation, and just keep dollar cost averaging like I have. If you want me to pull up my crystal ball, I think I'm pretty bullish. I just had John Burns.
Hmm.
He kind of does a lot of real estate consulting for a lot of the private equity and hedge funds, and he's generally pretty bullish, and so am I. We just went through a pandemic, and cap rates stayed the same. The
Yeah, pretty
multifamily
amazing.
apartments didn't move one bit. I feel like there's a bit of a pent up demand now. I want to caveat things that I don't want to sound tone deaf, but I feel like there's a lot of people out there that weren't impacted by COVID. These are the guys able to get their Grubhub delivered to their house. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can't have the relatives over for Thanksgiving or Christmas, but you got a lot of money just sitting around because you weren't able to buy those, the lower bowl tickets at the college football game or the basketball game you want to go to. You weren't able to take that vacation.
Hmm.
So I think there's a lot of pent up demand to spend some money. I mean, personally, I just work all day at home. Some days I'll leave the house once a week,
No
because I'm
kidding.
working out at home. And sometimes I look at my credit cards and I think there's something wrong, like that. Like sometimes it's hard to spend money, right? like,
Yeah, I hear. I see. I still seem to be doing a lot of. Amazon has done well out of my credit card this year.
yeah,
I haven't been,
yeah,
giving it to people physically, but it's been used a lot. A lot of Amazon, a lot of Uber Eats, and God knows what else. But it's,
yeah.
you know,
but this is what John Burns was kind of talking about, and I also follow Richard Duncan too, another economist. But you got to
hmm
watch those economists. They're kind of like weathermen. They're
yeah.
not really true investors and implementers of what they're thinking. But like, the stimulus money, right? I think they said the government knows that a lot of the population, I think more in the white collar workforce, they they're kind of sandbagging their stimulus dollars. They're not spending it. There's a graphic for like household debt. Household debt has been going down since pandemic because people have been kind of hoarding their cash,
Yep.
and for good reason, right? It's times of uncertainty right now. We don't know what's going to happen, so logically, smart people hold on to their cash, pay down their debt, fix up their houses, right? That was a big
Sure.
thing.
Build extensions on their houses if you can. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So they're kind of like, well, why would we want to put all the stimulus money if we know everybody's just sandbagging their cash, right? We got to get these people to spend their money to unleash it into the economy, which is why personally I think the stimulus should go to kind of the businesses and get it out of the folks, because either they'll spend it like crazy, or they'll keep it in savings, which you don't want. You want the money to go back into the system and churn. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's politically different though to give it just to business. I think when you have so many, blue collar folks um, with low savings and lost income and so on, I take your point though that a lot of the folks like you and me and white collar people that are able to earn money from a desk, you're just going to hoard the cash and wait for an investment to come along or wait for something to spend it on because there's not much you can do with it right now.
right, right. But yeah, I mean, I think folks like us, we're I'm not really political. I don't really care, but I want to pay attention to what is happening to kind of
Hmm.
move where the puck is going. And the way I see it is, yeah, they're probably going to have to come up with more stimulus, right? It's the politically correct thing to do out there when a part of your population is hurting. So where is that money going to flow to? Well, I don't know. I don't know. But I know they need to prop up, the lower middle class, and that's where apartments are going to be.
Yeah, and you should do well out of it. I mean, let me winding up here, Lane. So what? How long do you see yourself doing this? You've had a hell of a 5 year stretch. You're still a pretty young guy. I mean, are you just going to keep going, going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or do you see yourself just kind of taking a 5 year break when you're 45 to travel? I mean, what's your goal? What drives you to like stay in the house all week and just work apart from loving what you're doing?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna keep buying more assets. Maybe get into more riskier stuff, like some developments. We've done a couple of those.
Hmm.
Um, that's the progression. I think when you're starting out, you want to go after cash flow because you got to put food on the table. But once the cash flow keeps flowing and you've got a good base, why not take some swings at the fences, right? Exactly what I told myself not to do in the beginning. So that's because I'm bored, right? It's boring to do a stabilized class B apartment with bumping the rents up $100. It's super boring to do that.
Yeah.
Right? It's more fun to build a new asset, maybe do some luxury stuff. I don't know. I mean, I
But
think
you
at
need
this
that
point,
boring stuff to give you the reserves and the safety net to swing for the fences, right? You're not going to
right.
swing for the fences when you don't have that set
Right. I mean,
aside.
that's why I kind of cater towards guys, working professionals that are first generation wealth, as I am, right? Like,
Hmm.
but now I'm seeing the next level of, I've come across a lot of high net worth guys, and I always differentiate. Is this a first generation wealth guy, or did his daddy give him his money and he didn't really understand what it took to get there? But nope, I mean, I don't think it's any fault to them, but they just have the money, so they invest in very different type of things, different asset classes, different risk reward profiles, because they have that solid base. But yeah, it's always harder climbing your way up the mountain.
It is more fun though and more enriching. And you don't regret it when you look back. I don't think, and there's still a long way for me to go, certainly, and for you too, I'm sure. So, I've really enjoyed this, Lane. A lot of interesting topics covered here. Thank you very much. So, how can people learn more about you to you know follow you and dig into what you're up to?
Yeah, so I've been doing my podcast since 2016. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play. It's at Simple Passive Cash Flow Passive Investing. Or
Okay.
check out my website, simplepassivecashflow.com. And
Hmm.
yeah, thanks for having me, Colin. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So there you have it, folks. That was Lane Kawaoka on Colin Podcasting about Real Estate Show 33. I hope you enjoyed it. Very interesting guy. He certainly achieved a lot in a short period of time. I've had multiple guests on this show who've achieved an incredible amount in 4 or 5 years. I mean, I thought I was doing pretty well, fixing and flipping 100 properties in a single year in Tampa. But some of these guys literally buying thousands of units, they're putting me to shame. And fair play to them. It's just amazing what you can achieve if you're ambitious enough, if you set your goals high enough, and most importantly, if you're building relationships and networking with the right kinds of people. I think that was the major takeaway I had out of this show, that if you wanted to transition from being like a single family home investor to a multi-family home investor, you really need to start hanging around with a different group of people, and mastermind groups were one of them. And there's different types of people at every end of the spectrum, and certainly it is worthwhile to be networking all the time. It is one of my New Year's resolutions, if you want to call it, is to improve my networking, to start hanging out with people further up the ladder than I am, to learn from their strategies and try and leverage some of their relationships to accelerate my own real estate journey. I like to help people accelerate theirs, but I'm obviously not sitting still either. I'm trying to accelerate mine too, and that's the way it is. You always have people trying to move onwards in life, or certainly that's the way I am, and I think a lot of my listeners are like that too. So hope you're enjoying these shows. I'm certainly getting a kick out of the caliber of the guests we're having, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this year being an exciting one for the Colin podcast and the colininvestments.com website and all the various private investments that I have going on, and I'm doing some coaching as well. So a lot of fun stuff happening this year. I'm enjoying it immensely. Feel free to reach out if you want to chat to me about anything. Just click on the links to schedule a call on the website. And appreciate everything you've done and your support. And don't forget to leave a rating or a review for the podcast if you haven't done it yet. They're always appreciated. But apart from that, this is me signing out. I look forward to seeing you again soon for show 34. This is Colin Murphy signing out. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.